So what makes FracBars so unique? Here I have a student sheet of fraction bars. I can break it up into individual pieces, and in this way it's very much like any other manipulative that teaches fractions. For instance, I have a piece that represents a half, I have a piece that represents a third, I have a piece that represents a fourth. This in of itself is not necessarily that unique, but what makes FracBars unique is that the reverse sides are marked so that one can see the fractional parts of each of the fractions. So for instance, if I take this 1/2 piece and hold next to it this 1/3 piece, I turn over the 1/2 piece and I see that 1/3 is equal to 2/3 of 1/2. Similarly, let's take 1/4. I could see that 1/4 is, turn this thing over, 1/4 is 1/2 of 1/2. You see, what's difficult for kids is not necessarily recognizing that a half and a fourth and a sixth are parts of a whole. What's difficult for kids to see is that a part of a whole, like a half, can itself be considered a whole, of which there are fractional parts. Now, I can even use these FracBars as a fraction calculator. I take the one piece that represents the whole, I turn it over, and let's suppose I want to add 1/4 plus 1/3. I take 1/4, and I add 1/3 to it, and what do I get? I get an answer of 7/12. So I can see that 1/4 plus 1/3 is equal to 7/12. The most amazing thing about these FracBars, and what motivated us to develop them, is it can visually and clearly show fraction division. We believe this is the first manipulative to do so. So for instance, if I wanted to divide 1/2 by 1/3, I'm asking how many of these red pieces can fully cover this blue piece. I got one piece, one full 1/3, and part of a third. Which part? I flip it over and I see that it takes a half of this 1/3 piece, so that 1/2 divided by 1/3 is 1 and 1/2. In the past, the way we had to explain fraction division is as follows. We would write 1/2 divided by 1/3 is equal to 1/2 times 3/1, which equals to 3/2, which equals to 1 1/2. Using the FracBars, we could illustrate this visually. You see, this process is what one professor described to me as, ours is not to reason why, just invert and multiply. It really has little meaning for the students. In this case, using the FracBars, we can illustrate it visually. And so students can see for the first time, why is it that when I divide one fraction by another fraction, I take two numbers less than 1, I divide one by the other, that I can get a number bigger than 1. So 1/2 divided by a third is 1 and 1/2 of this third piece. So 1/2 divided by 1/3 is 1 and 1/2. Similarly, I can take 1/3 and divide it by 1/4. How many of these orange pieces fit in this red piece? 1/3 divided by 1/4 is 1 and part of a 1/4 piece. What part? I flip it over and I see 1/3. So 1/3 divided by 1/4 is 1 1/3.